there's two things. I got two questions, JT, on this one. The first one is
Honestly, I don't even know why I'm here. Okay,
that
continue.
you've got the dial-in code, man. You're the meeting host. We couldn't do it without you. But this thing where there's this perception where running itself is what you do on the roads and the trails and when you're moving your feet back and forth, and
Hmm.
that is running, but that's not necessarily training.
Right.
Training has everything to do with what you're doing and enjoying the meals or the sleep or the stretching or the small strength exercises. And I've heard a lot of folks talk about, well, I'm not running as many intense miles, but I am spending a little bit more time trying to be a little bit more flexible with my diet or trying to enjoy something outside of running that allows me to be more grateful for the limited time that I spend outdoors. And
Hmm.
and I thought that was that was really neat. I don't know if that was like a call of saying like they're just trying to run away from their kids for 30 minutes a day and like hallelujah. But I mean, in from your opinion, do you see any of those shifts happening with the folks that you're coaching or with the things that you're observing in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see it with some of the athletes that I coach, but just other runners that I may follow on social media, people that I've talked to. I think a lot of us as runners, whether we want to admit it or not, you tie up a lot of your identity in it. You can tie up a lot of your
Yeah,
self-worth
yeah,
in results and getting that validation, getting that feedback. And we're not getting that right now, at least in the ways that we typically do. So I think back to the point I was making earlier, like just using this as a time to realize that, like, realize the role that running plays in your life, or that it can play in your life, and that it can mean different things at different points depending on who you are and what your situation is. So I think everything, like, people think of training like, oh, how's your training? Oh, my training's going well. I hit 60 miles last week, or I hit tough track workout on Tuesday, and I hammered a long run. Those are tiny little elements of
right.
training. Everything is training. The way that you live your life, the way you put in your miles, yeah, that's training. But the way you recover is training. The way that you eat when you're preparing for an event versus when you're not is training, and that can evolve. The way you
Mm.
treat people when you're out running, and how you talk to them about what it is that they're doing, like, all of that's training. And I think it's, for me, on the coaching side of things, it's been getting people to realize that, like, training isn't just this thing that has a box of its own.
Right.
Everything that you do, the way that you live your life, it's going to affect your running in some way. It's going to affect your workouts. It's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect your diet. And when people are able to see that, when the light bulb goes off, I think they end up having a healthier relationship with running, or at least their relationship with running and how they see their place in it tends to be a little bit better than it may have been when everything was so results oriented. And I've got to be super strict with my diet. I got to get to bed by 9 o'clock. I've got to do my track workout
Yeah.
on Tuesday and my tempo on Thursday and my long run on Saturday, and all the
Right.
crazy things that we do as runners.
Yeah.
But helping them to, like, loosen it a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And where one of the
No,
places
that's a
that
good point.
one of the places that I see this play out is, have you been watching the Bowerman Track Club and Pete's group do kind of like their dual meets? Have you guys
Yeah.
both been following that? The one thing that I find absolutely fantastic about that is, I don't really care. Donovan Brazier is going to run super fast. Great. Whether it's in the US on a cinder track or whether it's over in
Right.
Monaco, he's going to be fine.
He can't help
But
himself.
yeah, it really, he has no governor. It is what it is.
Yeah.
The curse of the world champ. But it's the relay events that are absolutely, in my opinion, as an observer, those are the things that the athletes are happiest about, that they're
Mm.
most relaxed about, that they're really engaged with. And it's like Shelby Houlihan running an anchor leg, trying to run
Yeah.
down Chris Derrick, and it's that joy that I think everybody wants, whether you're out the door
Mm.
for your first 5K or whether you're an athlete who's feeling the stress of trying to run a fast 5,000 meters. But man, I don't know, Mario, your take on those type of meets, but I've been like I've been loving the relays more than anything else. It's just fun. It's just they look like they're having fun.
Well, especially the mixed relays, which you
Yeah.
typically don't see in a standard track meet. Yeah, and to your point, I think you're spot on. Like they're having fun, even if it's just within their own team, and it doesn't mean anything. They're not trying to qualify for the
Right,
Olympics
right.
or the World Championships. They're just out there having fun. And I think for any runner, regardless of what level you're at, you've got to take some time. I think you should try and do it every week, but remind yourself like why this was fun in the first place. Like what was fun about running in the first place. And it's going to be different for everybody, but I think for me, a lot of it was just racing kids around the schoolyard when I was a kid. And it wasn't even whether I won or lost. It was just the feeling that it gave me when I was in it. And you have fun with your friends and maybe you talk a little bit of trash, and like that's the stuff that lights you up and is worth like is worth getting excited about and worth celebrating. But I think right now, like with a lot of these meets, I like that since they're, especially with like Bowerman Track Club, they're able to call their own shots. They can do whatever they want. I think tonight they're having another meet and they're having I think the men, maybe it's just the men, maybe it's the women too. They're doing a 2K elimination where they're going to
Cool.
race each other over 2K, and whoever's in last at the end of a lap, like you're
Wow,
out.
those are great.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I saw that a few years ago at some meet in Australia for a mile,
Mhm.
and it's
Yep.
really compelling. And you can see people like,
There's tactics. You can take
yeah,
off. You can sprint at certain times.
yeah,
You
and
know,
it's fun watching the athletes do that because they've got to think through it in a different way. But you're looking at everyone around the track, and they are more focused on that than they are the 5K that was set up to go sub 12:50, because for the first 11 laps of that, they're just going to be running whatever 61s, and
yeah,
it's not worth watching. Whereas
Right.
here, it's like things are going to change like very quickly, and it's intriguing. And I think what I hope to see coming out of this pandemic time is just more creativity, especially in track, maybe in road races too. And JT, you can speak more to this, but just meet directors, race directors willing to do things a little bit differently because
Yeah.
they're fun for the athletes, but they're also more entertaining for the fans. And I think that's what's been cool, even though there's not anyone in the
yeah,
stands and these things aren't always broadcast live, but they're experimenting with things and the response has been pretty awesome.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that too, and actually in that event that you're talking about, that 2K elimination, they used to run them indoors on like those what was like 160-meter tracks,
Mm-hmm.
and it called it Devil Takes the Hindmost, and there would actually be a
Mm.
person in the back, like a plastic pitchfork running behind, and if you got poked, if you got this is like back before waivers, if you got poked by this guy, right, you were out. And so everybody would race around, and then right at the very end, not don't get stabbed by the devil. Um,
Yeah,
but
words to
yeah,
live by.
yeah, it is. Don't get stabbed by the devil.
Yeah,
That is it. That
yeah,
is it.
that's it.
But JT, I think Mario brings up a good point in terms of like road races and just kind of
Hmm.
the vibe and the energy. I mean, who cares if it's 10K or 10.2K or whatever it is? I mean, what's going through your mind when you think
Well,
about
it's not
bringing this
just
up?
distance. I mean, it's that this pandemic and then the fact that we're forced into our homes and then forced into starting to think different and entirely. So, like, how can I motivate people to move in a way that's not going to be with other people, or to get them up every morning to try something new? And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is interesting and could have effect when road racing comes back. So there's these lessons that you can learn of because we were forced to think differently and not keep doing the same 5K every single Sunday and you're not you just get into a cycle. And the fact that this like snapped us awake a little bit, it's been huge for Run Local, and that we're like, oh, we can create a digital content universe that has very little to do with the actual day on race on Sunday, and people are going to be more motivated because of that. So now we're filling up their time in between and telling a story or running the coast from California, from Santa Monica to San Francisco.
If I could
Yeah,
jump in real quick, two things that jump
yeah.
out to me about that. Number one, I mean, runners, we're all creatures of habit, right? We tend to
Hmm.
buy the same shoes over and over. We run a lot of the same races year in and year out. I see it with athletes, especially new athletes that I work with. They've done the same marathon cycle like 4 or 5 times in a row. And we need forced change in order to start looking at things from a different perspective. And I think to your point, JT, like that's right now, like that's what's happening. It's been this forced pause, and you don't have a choice but to if I can say it, shit or get off the pot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people are doing cool things like you're doing with the California Coast 500, and like some of these teams are doing experimenting, and
Yep.
I think that's just like hopefully will benefit everyone moving forward,
I think
because
so.
it makes things more compelling.
Yeah. One thing to add on to this, because I think this is an awesome theme, is I was listening to Bradley Wiggins not too long ago, and he was talking about, it's been like, I think a couple of days ago, it was like 8 years to the day when he won the gold medal in London in the time trial. And I'm just thinking like how he was talking about the transition, and that was the kind of the golden age of British cycling, and how having that event got so many people interested in cycling, and you saw these upticks in clubs afterwards. And it's not a mass participation race. It's a mass, like, it's basically like watching, you're just a spectator, right?
Yep.
And what got me kind of like connecting the dots with running is the fact that London is now going to be just elite only, basically like a crit race in a park, right? And they're just going
London
to be
Marathon.
running London Marathon. And I
Yep.
thought, what a fantastic opportunity that we have with some of these events to sort of like showcase these athletes for who they are, and people are
Yep.
going to get fired up and like, oh yeah, that's amazing, that's great. It's sort of like, as I was thinking about it, it's like this is the London Marathon is going to be like the NBA bubble, right?
Right.
Where you've got some folks watching these athletes perform. And Mario, from your experience, and this comes back to how you cover events and how you tell that story, how have you been thinking about telling that narrative of like being part of the community is unique in the fact that runners can actually participate on the same starting line as Elliot, but now we're in a position where we get a chance to watch this happen and root them on in a little bit of different way. Like, how are you telling that story, or what's the
That's
vibe that you're
interesting.
getting for that?
Here's
Second
what I'm
interesting
thinking.
question of the day. First of all, I want to give Josh credit for 2 interesting questions of the day. First time ever.
Take the next week off, Josh. You are good.
Done.
I'm thinking about it in a couple different ways. So number one of the great things about our sport, especially road racing, something like the London Marathon, if you're running it, you are part of the same event, you're running the same course, you're having more or less the same experience as Eliud Kipchoge and the other guys in the front. And you can't do that in any other sport. Not really in cycling. You're not riding the Tour de France with all those folks. You're definitely not getting on the basketball court with LeBron James, or on the baseball field with the San Francisco Giants. Like, it's just not gonna happen. And there's something cool about that I hope gets preserved, because I think it is exciting for a lot of people to be able to say like, hey, that year that Meb Keflezighi won the Boston Marathon, I was at mile 20 on Heartbreak Hill when he was
there
crossing.
that day.
Yeah, I was there that day, and I was in the same race as him when it happened, and that's super cool. On the flip side, I think when you pull these elite athletes out of the crowd, it does shine more of a spotlight on them, and I think that is a good thing. So the question becomes, for the sport, how do you balance those two? And it'll be interesting right now, because people are craving sports anyway. If you've got an elite race at the London Marathon in the secure biosphere, whatever that is, that's broadcast widely, even though there are no fans on the ground, I mean, you can more easily tell the story about the race, because that's all there is to talk about. There isn't, and this is no offense to any of charity runners or anyone else in the race, but there aren't those stories to tell. I mean, how often have we watched the New York City Marathon broadcast, and you've got the most incredible marathoners in the world duking it up out front, and every 5 minutes they're cutting to a human interest piece, and they have to, because it's part of the event, and it's a money generating thing, and all of their sponsor obligations and all of that stuff. But for something like this, that's all there is to watch, and if it's really compelling and if it's presented in the right way, you're gonna grow fans. I mean, it's gonna happen. I mean, Eliud Kipchoge is a great example. Say what you want about the sub 2 hour marathon things. You got one guy literally chasing a clock, and there's nothing else going on. Like, that's the event of the day, And I think there were like over 1 million people tuning into the streams on that when it was happening. And the course itself, especially when he did it in Vienna, was just like lined with people. And this is one guy, like, and one guy like chasing the clock. And I mean, yeah, there's something cool about breaking a barrier and first man to run under 2 hours, but racing itself is really, really compelling. And if it's presented in the right way, and that's all there is to watch, I think you're going to grow a fan base. So it's, I'm rambling here, but it becomes this like tough balance between like, how do you separate that so that the attention can be put on the athletes and the sport, and you can get fans to get excited about that, versus the mass participation event, which is also great, benefits the local economy, gives runners the experience of, sharing the course with elite athletes and having their own special day. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's becoming pretty obvious right now that there needs to be some kind of marriage between the two.
Yeah, and it comes back to community, right? The community is more about the participating. It's about being observant. A fan. Exactly. JT, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No,
Probably
I think we're just going to see a lot of those opportunities. So it's not just going to be London. I guess Fukuoka's done this forever for the most part.
Well, Tokyo did it back in March. Right.
And they were just elites. I know there's another one that we're secretly working on that might be like an American version of this, closer to December. I can't really talk more about that. But then there's going to be a lot of track meets beyond just these BTCs coming up in August from Music City that will be just athletes only and people focused on that. And then I believe Jesse Williams, we're working with him on the Under Armour Sunset Tour. It's supposed to be towards the end of August. And what I think is interesting about Jesse's a really kind of innovative guy. And not only is he looking at it from this is like an elite athlete experience, then it's only elites. It's going to be how is he showing that experience? So trying to get it to more like a YouTube audience, or doing on top of a flow track webcast, which he'll have that everyone else has. Are we doing it from, Will Lear holding a Instagram live thing with the behind the scenes footage of it? So starting to show like some like new angles and new interviews and just new viewpoints, I think, to grow that fan base, because not everyone's looking at flow track. They're going to be watching it from different platforms.
Well, the hardcore fans are going to be looking at flow track, but you're not going to bring anyone new in, because they're one, they don't know what's happening, and two, they're not going to fork over $20 a month right away if they have no idea what to what to expect. So
exactly.
Right. And you need like a in-car dash cam or something like that Will Lear can run with, just like a chest cam, what it's like.
Well, that and the Devil's pitchfork. He's going to be holding tons of shit by the time you're done with him, Josh. He's going to have a backpack.
He's going to have a whole backpack full of tricks.
I love that.
That's amazing. Well, I think it's going to be exciting nonetheless. Almost as exciting as the gardening that's going on outside. I don't know if you guys can hear any of that, but it's
okay. I got a friend making some stuff in the microwave in the kitchen right now too. So we're competing.
This is the new normal.
It is.
Hey Mario, speaking of races, and getting back to an opportunity for all of us, tell us a little bit about some of your favorite, maybe a favorite event that you want to go back to, or you want to see enhanced, or you want to see live on. Is there any that come to mind? I mean, it could be local 5K, it could be.
Are you saying when all this comes back, Josh? When we're allowed to?
I think so. Yeah. Like in 2030 when we can all get together again.
Dude, that's your third interesting question of this podcast. I don't know if I can handle it. I wasn't planning on having to think this much.
Well, to be honest, my track record would not have indicated that there would have been.
He now averages 0.5.
Yeah.
Per episode.
Think about that here for a second. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there is. I mean,
Josh, what's yours?
Man, if I'm going to be totally honest, I think there's one at my parents' house that I've been doing for, I haven't missed it in 25 years. And
it's like Johnny's Apple Run or whatever.
It's the Lamson Cable Bridge 5K. And it's freezing cold. You start on one end, you run across a the cable bridge, and then you finish in this gigantic like hangar where they make cranes for building construction, and they clear all that
Mhm.
out. So the finishing shoot is in a building, and hot Dr.
That's
Pepper
cool.
afterwards. But the biggest thing is has nothing to do with the race. It's all about drinking beer and
Yeah.
going wine tasting afterwards with some friends.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing. That's the community piece that you miss. It's like I mean, whatever. I can run a 5K in the cold any day of the week, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's the community piece. It's catching up after
And the
that.
tradition. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think along those lines, and since this is the Run Local podcast, I mean, here in Marin County, Labor Day weekend, there is an event called the Mount Tam
Yeah.
Hill Climb,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it's been going on for, I believe, 40-ish years now, and the route is pretty well known. You go from downtown Mill Valley to the top of Mount Tam, and it's 3.2 miles to the top. And I've run the route countless times. I've run the race twice, I believe. And what's cool about it is the community aspect. I mean, the race is over, everyone gets down the mountain, and you go to this guy's neighborhood, like, who lives two
That's
blocks
cool.
from the start, and you hang out in his backyard, and they've got food. And I think it's the top 10 finishers get the t-shirt, like get the Mount Tam Hill Climb t-shirt. And it just has like a cool community vibe to it, and it's people that you see all the time, and running the mountain. And it's actually part of like a bigger thing that weekend. There's a group that rides up on the road, there's another group that rides up on mountain bikes, and there is like it's called the Triple Crown. There's some people who do all three, and they get they get a prize for it, and it's super low key.
Yeah.
I think it costs like $10 or something like that, and you sign up the morning of. But I love that event. It's small. I mean, people definitely aren't coming in from out of town, but if you live here and you've run that route, it's pretty special and cool. So that event in particular, it's not going to happen this year, so I look forward to when it comes back. But I love those types of events, and I love that type of atmosphere. And I think and hope, and JT, I'd love to get some of your thoughts on this as a local race director.
Mhm.
As things start to come back, it's not all going to happen at once. And
Right.
I think the last thing that's going to come back are these huge events, right? The 50,000 person New York City Marathon, Beta Breakers, Wharf to Wharf. I mean, great events, super cool things, but the risk is obviously a lot higher. And
Mhm.
those events tend to draw people from out of town. I think people are going to be probably hesitant to travel for a while, but I think that's a great opportunity for local events to really bring in the community and bring people together. And if they haven't already over the last few years or several decades, like, really make it a thing in their community that people get excited about and rally behind. Because as much as I love going to New York and Boston and the Olympics and all these huge events, there's nothing like a local race. I mean, it's just, I wish more people would get out into their communities and realize, like, hey, you don't have to break the bank on an entry fee. You don't have to spend, all day traveling. You can go to this local event, and it can be some of the most fun you'll ever have.
Yeah. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head, but it comes back to, what can you do? This is just like the athlete of saying, we're not going to force something that we can't have. We're not going to cry over spilled milk that we can't have 50,000 people together. Let's talk about what can we do in this industry and then in events, and that will be a sequential process. So a great place to be right now is the owner of a trail race, or looking at those things. That's a great opportunity to be like outside, small fields. It can be so super spread out. Start there. And then let's talk about the 500 person small town 5K or whatever it's going to be. And then there's just going to be a slowly build. But yeah, why not celebrate those local hometown races?
Yeah.
And they're honestly going to be the ones that need it the most. Wharf to Wharf has an endowment and a bank account that can handle a few years off. And I hate to say it, but like, great community thing. They give a ton of money to local schools, but they're the ones that can take a hit right now. New York City Marathon, same thing. The ones that that are probably in most danger are the ones that were like kind of banking on these things happening year after year to
Right.
support their local charities.
And that's where folks get their start too, right? You're doing like your local apple core fun run, or you're doing something where you walk out
You're
the
like, oh, I'm
door.
good at this.
Yeah, and I'm okay. And so
I like
and
this.
maybe my question to both of you guys to carry on with that is, when we do come back, where do we want to lean in to make it better, and what do we want to leave behind? Like this is
Yeah.
like a reset to the 1970s, right? Where we're just starting over again, and we can take stock of what is really important in these events and the experience. And so my question to both of you is like, what do we want to keep? What do we want to leave behind?
Mario.
I was just going to throw it to you so I could have more time to think about
All
it.
right, I'll take it. You know what? It's my show. I'll put myself on the frying pan. I want to leave behind the expo. I hate expos. I hate them. I don't need another tchotchke. I don't want 2 days before it. I'm exhausted by the time the damn race starts. Can we just leave that? They're inside. I don't leave behind the expo. And you know what I want to add is all the things we're creating right now in terms of community building, training and connection between our runners leading into a competition. Like I think some people have done it really well over the years, but I think now we're starting to really tap into getting people prepared for the race and then connecting with them after and creating like more value through the sport of running than just, hey, we'll take your $50, come to our race, here's your medal, here's your shirt, goodbye. Like there's a way to stretch this out and to give a larger value proposition of just, hey, this is cool. This is a cool community.
Yeah, like having
There's my
folks
two.
come in, like they meet virtually and then all of a sudden meet up at the race and say like, "Hey,
Yeah,
we've been training together on the line. Let's go run this thing together now."
yeah, happy hours, connections. It's all the things we love
Ah,
about the races. Yeah,
that's cool.
but
That's
no
cool.
expos.
Well, building off that, I mean, as someone who's been to more expos than I care to count, I'm with you on that. I mean, I don't. People ask me every year when I go to Boston, "Did you go to the expo?" I'm like, if I didn't have to go there to pick up my bib because I wasn't racing, nope, I definitely did not go to the expo. So yes, less expos. But Josh, to that point, I mean, I think that's exactly it. Even if it is, a small local 5K or a small local turkey trot of some sort, something that we know is going to be annual and it's going to keep happening, is starting the build up to that way in advance and taking advantage of the technology that we have now to connect people earlier and to give them the resources that they need in terms of training, in terms of motivation, in terms of community, being like local workouts and long runs building up to it. You said happy hours. I think that's great. Training runs on the course, and really having this race day be the celebration of all of these months that have been building up to it. And again, to what I was talking about earlier, it's another way to really focus on the process, like the event itself. It's it's the culmination of that sort of thing, but it's not an end goal. It's just a stop along the way, and maybe it's an annual stop along the way, but it's really about the process, leading up to it, and the people that you meet and the things that you learn and the experiences that you have along the way. It's not just about that one day, because that one day the race itself is going to last anywhere from you know
Yeah,
15 minutes to maybe a few hours. But I think what's created in the build up to that can last a lot longer. It can definitely strengthen those bonds. I think it can strengthen communities, and that's really what we need as a society, but definitely as a sport right now as well.
it's cool. I like it. What's next for you? So that's what's next, hopefully, for the run world when it comes back. Do you have anything sights on your training, your coaching, your podcast, basically your media empire, Fraioli
My one person media empire.
and
Um,
Tahoe, the dog.
And
Yeah.
Tahoe. Well, Tahoe has started running in the last couple of months, which has been great. He ran
Oh,
5 miles this morning. He is passed
sweet.
the F out next to me right now, which is great. So I want to continue increasing his mileage. I haven't actually coached a workout since March, so I've been out running with him, and I'm like giving him tips on, as I was saying earlier, how to get up the hill and modulate his effort accordingly. So I mean,
Oh, that's
I
great.
guess I'm getting my on the ground coaching fix that way. But I mean, in terms of what I'm doing on the media side of things, I put the newsletter out every week. I put the podcast out every week. There's always a temptation to want to grow it, and I think especially living in the Bay near Silicon Valley, I mean, that's sort of how people think
Yeah.
around
How are you
here.
going to
It's like,
10x your life, bro?
yeah,
How are you going to 10x your life?
exactly. And I think for me, I've worked so long and so hard just to get to this point, and it's going successfully. And now I'm like, all right, I don't need to do more. How can I do better at what I'm doing every week? So it's just continuing to make small adjustments, refining things in terms of, the quality of the content I'm putting out, improving as an interviewer, improving as a writer, diversifying the types of guests that I have on my show, like those sort of things, rather than like, okay, what else can I add to my plate? I don't need to add anything else to my plate. For myself, before the pandemic hit, I was going to see if I could go 2020 without doing a race. So now it's made that a lot easier for me.
Easy.
And
Nailing it.
I've done some solo time trials on my own just because I wanted to do them, like not as a part of any event or anything like that, just as a personal challenge. And I'm not excited to do any of that anytime soon, but that could potentially interest me again once we get toward fall. I'm going to do, I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but tomorrow I think I'm going to do my longest run of the year so far
Nice.
on the trails, and go up on Bolinas Ridge, which I've been exploring each of the last few weekends, and
How far
see
you
how
think?
much TBD. Could be as long as 22. Could be as short as 10. I don't know.
Sweet. I love
We'll see how I feel. I'd like to go long, but I'm just gonna see what the day gives me. But I mean, for right now, it's just taking things one day at a time. As cliche as that sounds, I mean, I
like
can't predict the future as much as the rest of us can. So
Right.
I'm just gonna see what today brings. And I've never really been one for super long-term planning anyway. I mean, I generally have an idea of where I want to go. And then I just sort of figure it out as I go. So I'm just kind of continuing along those lines for right now in every aspect of my life. So
Well,
That's
Mario,
cool.
I know that there's going to be some folks that want to follow your work. What's the best way to do that? I mean, both of our listeners are going to want to follow your work from now on.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I know you're not trying to grow and do more, so this
yeah,
podcast should be perfect for that.
yeah. It'll definitely keep you right where it might even bring you down a little bit. Who knows? If you're lucky.
Well, themorningshakeout.com is where you can check out most of my quote unquote work in terms of writing and podcasting. All the podcasts are linked there. It's where you can find the show notes. You can stream episodes. My newsletter, you can subscribe to it there, themorningshakeout.com/subscribe. That comes out every Tuesday morning. And I'm coming up on the 5-year anniversary of launching that. I started it toward the end of my time at Competitor, and I've put it out every week for the last 248 weeks. So
Wow.
looking forward to keeping that going. But I mean, it's really a repository for me. I mean, I put things in there that I'm thinking about, that I'm reading, that I'm listening to. I'll offer opinions on the sport and sort of what's happening, and share that with whoever wants to
Cool.
read it. So if you're interested in getting a take from someone who's worked on a few different sides of the industry, you can find it at themorningshakeout.com/subscribe. So that's the best place, and everything else is linked off of there as well.
It's perfect. That was great. Thank you for spending an hour with us, Josh. Thank you for 3 great questions. Honestly.
Now, to be fair, I think there were 4.
This might be stretching it a little bit. I'll give you
you're
I'll give
getting-
you 3. The fourth one's not jumping out at this point.
Yeah, they were like half
All
mile.
right. All right.
I love it. Well,
Just
what's
take
next
it, man.
so thank you, Mario.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yep. And what's next for Run Local is a number of things coming up. The Silicon Valley half, SV half, presented by Excite Credit Union, has gone virtual, Josh. It's gone virtual. I bet you can't believe that. And a race has been canceled and pivoted to virtual. But we have what's called real virtual racing. We're even putting a little TM after that. Real virtual racing with our partners at Power Lab. So Power Lab, the app, they're going to help us create actual segments in Silicon Valley, San Jose, and one in San Francisco, where people can run like a half marathon segment and then compare themselves to others. So very similar to the Strava, but guess what? Like it doesn't cost premium or anything like that. So, and we've got a leaderboard for that. It's going to be kind of cool. So real virtual racing for the Silicon Valley half, 10K and 5K. California Coast 500 will be done on September 8th. And then, you know what? We're going to put our head in the sand for a couple months, watch elites run, and just be fans for a little bit.
I love it.
That's great. That's great.
Everything else in our world you can find at runlocalevents.com. Podcast comes out whenever Josh is free, and I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's about it. Mario, thank you again. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks a
Thanks,
lot,
guys.
Mario. Great to see you.
Likewise.